It is the most scandalous thing I think I've ever read.
And the diplomat said, "I'm a diplomat, not a pimp." This was a request for a 16-year-old blonde.
I cannot believe that. Really grim stories. What kind of things was he doing to them?
So he was basically sort of grinding into her behind. His chat-up line when he was dancing with girls was to say, "What's it like to have a royal against your thigh?"
Andrew had a few dogs, but he didn't treat his dog very well at all.
Yes, this is an extraordinary story which I got from a close member of the royal family.
What else do you know about Andrew that you haven't been able to publish?
Well, there's a lot more about him.
Andrew Lownie, welcome back to the Daily Expresso. You took down Prince Andrew with your first book entitled. You've now added an additional chapter to it. I read through it yesterday for the second time, this new chapter. It is the most scandalous thing I think I've ever read. And I read your book the first time.
Gosh,
and I thought that
gets
was
worse and worse, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, well, the stories are beginning to come out, and I think it's going to get worse, even worse.
Really?
There's still a lot more to come out.
Goodness gracious.
And that's, of course, there's also stuff the lawyers left out.
Yes.
So that gives you an indication of how bad it is.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, tell me about Andrew Mountbatten's demand for 16-year-old girls.
Well, we've kind of had a hint of this before in the hardback. He when he was in South Africa, he asked the consul there, or rather his secretary said, he likes blondes, and the diplomat said, "I'm a diplomat, not a pimp." Mm-hmm. And here we've got him being paid to open a golf course in the Bahamas, owned by Sir Peter de Savory, and a whole series of requests that go in. He has things like he doesn't like music and lifts, he likes lukewarm water to drink, and this was a request for a 16-year-old blonde.
I cannot believe that. And is this one that Ghislaine Maxwell was helping organise the girls for?
No, this is a completely separate thing. This is nothing to do with Ghislaine and with Epstein. So it's just one of the things that he went for. There was a lot of stuff on underage girls I had, for example, on his time in Kazakhstan and Libya, but we weren't able to get people to testify on that.
Okay. You also have some really grim stories about his behaviour towards flight attendants. What kind of things was he doing to them?
Well, he's sort of, this sort of predatory behaviour really towards women is fascinating. And I've only just put a few examples in. I mean, there are plenty of examples that I had on top of this. I got about 100,000 words, which I had to cut down to 10,000. And this is a story of him basically going on to a British Airways flight, being greeted by the air hostess, and she put out her hand, and he took it, swung her around, and so he was basically sort of grinding into her behind, and then practiced his golf swing with her, with a woman he'd never met before. And the John Longmore, who goes on the record, a policeman at Heathrow, felt that this was, pretty shocking stuff, but didn't feel he could report it at the time. And he actually came forward and gave me the story. And that's one of the extraordinary things. People have been coming, policemen, members of staff, former people who work with them in charities, school friends, all sorts of people come out of the woodwork now who I wasn't able to talk to the first time around.
Mm-hmm. If any other man got onto a commercial airline, grabbed a female air hostess from behind and then starts grinding against them, they'd be done for sexual assault and they'd be arrested and thrown off straight away.
Exactly. Yeah, and it happened. I mean, I've got another story. When he was doing flying training in Yorkshire, he would get invited to 18th birthday parties, and he would do the same sort of thing with girls. He'd pinch their bottoms and anything really just to sort of kind of humiliate and embarrass them, because of course at that age, I mean, they're there with a prince, and then he behaves like that to them. I mean, his chat-up line when he was dancing with girls was to say, "What's it like to have a royal against your thigh?"
Oh my God.
You should try that. See if it works.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure my wife would love to hear that one. Good grief. He's also, in this new chapter, you say how terrible he is to his staff and they're scared of him.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I talked to a long-term personal assistant of Sarah Ferguson, and that was the point that she made, that they were just walking on eggshells whenever he was around. And there's a story of someone who worked at Sunninghill, and Andrew, when he passed him the corridor, made him bow even lower and lower. So it's all part of this sort of humiliation, this standing on ceremony on his sort of status. It's everything to him.
And what was it that he did that shocked people when he was in Hong Kong? Because last time I spoke to you, there was a story about him in a hotel with, I think, double digits of prostitutes.
Yep.
But what else has he been getting up to in Hong Kong?
Well, this came from another source, and actually we named, there was a banker deputed to take him round because the banker knew kind of all the best spots in Hong Kong. And he was appalled because Andrew wanted to talk about Japanese rope bondage. They went down to the red light district, or that's where Andrew wanted to go. He'd taken over the whole floor of this hotel. And the other stories of how, for example, embassy staff had to book 2 rooms for him, one to sleep in and one for the prostitutes. And presumably that was all being put on the taxpayer's tab.
Yeah.
Another story of him in Prague, again an official trip. Request goes out that he would like to meet a nubile young woman. Former Miss Slovakia is found and paid 10,000 euros to spend the night with him. And lots and lots of stories of him basically going to events paid for by us, the taxpayer, and then on the back of that having private time with people, going off and having massages, etc.
So what was this you said there about the Japanese
rope bondage? What is that?
Yeah, what is that?
I should have looked that up. Well, I'm assuming it's what's it called? Anyway, where people just tie themselves up and get a thrill.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've heard about it, but clearly he's fascinated by porn, watches a lot of porn. I mean, there's a story of him going to stay with the widow of a former American ambassador, and he didn't come out of his room all day. He was busy with this porn. And that was always the story when he was on board ship, that he had huge collections of pornographic magazines that were brought in by his protection officer.
Oh my goodness. Right, quickly before we jump back into this, we've got a brand new channel for you. Check it out. It's called Daily Expresso Clips. It's all the best content we have on here. Loads of exclusive content that you won't see on this channel. It's just purely Daily Expresso. More of me, more of Andrew. And actually, we've got an exclusive clip of Andrew talking about Fergie on there right now. So go check that out. This teddy bear. Now, I'm not sure what his obsession is with 16-year-old girls and teddy bears, but you write about the fact that he carries a teddy bear around with him.
Well, he's well known for his collection of teddy bears. I mean, I think they've been taken away from Royal Lodge and put into storage. But he even had teddy bears, at the outer office in his office. People would come and interview him, press, and be kind of shocked to see a teddy bear sitting there. When he went off on his honeymoon and after his wedding, there was a teddy bear actually in the carriage as he left. And when one day he left his teddy bear in Asia, the valet had to go back and pick it up, presumably paid for by us.
Yeah, so strange. Now we're all British here. We love our dogs. We're British people. We love dogs, don't we? Andrew had a few dogs, but he didn't treat his dog very well at all.
Yes, this is an extraordinary story which I got from a close member of the royal family who had witnessed this on one of Andrew's regular shooting weekends at Sandringham. And the dog, Black Labrador, I think called Bendrix, basically snatched a sausage roll. And Andrew kicked the dog in the head. And everyone was kind of rather shocked. Prince Philip was there, I think the Princess Anne also, and nothing was said and done. So the guests reprimanded Andrew and said that's not the way to treat an animal. And Andrew told him to get lost. But that night at dinner, Prince Philip came up to this man and said, thank you for doing that. Andrew needs a good scolding every so often. But it is extraordinary that Prince Philip didn't do this. We kind of thought that he was the enforcer, shall we say, in the family.
Yeah.
And it gives us a sense of how they kind of abrogated all their responsibilities. I don't know whether they were scared of Andrew, didn't want a scene, but this is quite indicative of how he's basically had no boundaries and allowed to behave in the way he has.
Yeah. How would he survive in something like the Navy then if he's not able to take orders or be disciplined?
Well, I mean, he was given a hard time by some people, and they found that their careers were curtailed. And the ones that sucked up to him and were nice, he would go and report back to mummy, and they would find that they ended up as admirals. Huh. So he wasn't adverse to using his mother, and shockingly, she seemed to do support him in these things.
Yeah. So she turned a blind eye. I never want to talk ill of the late Queen because she was my favourite monarch, but by all accounts, she turned a blind eye to everything that Andrew was doing.
Yeah, I think, that is the shocking thing. We always thought she put the monarchy ahead of her own family, but that wasn't the case. And, the extraordinary thing is these stories about Andrew have been circulating in the press now for 15 years. So there were plenty of opportunities for the Queen, or indeed the present King, to kind of discipline him and take him away, for example, from his role as a trade envoy. Mm-hmm. When Fergie was caught selling access to him on film for £500,000, that he actually continued as a trade envoy for another year after that. And every time he was named in the Epstein revelations, she would give him another honour, make him a vice admiral, or give him the knight of something or other.
Yeah. Also says in your book that Andrew deeply detests Charles and always has done. What is it about Charles that he hates so much?
Well, I think he thinks he's not a real man. Andrew would make a much better king. I think he thinks Charles is weak. I think there's clearly a lot of jealousy there. I mean, Charles also feels that Andrew's had a pretty easy ride. He was allowed to have a career in the Navy. He was good looking. Treated better by Philip than Charles was. So there's no love lost there. And actually, one of the interesting things, again, talking to this personal assistant, is how the Fergie didn't have a good relationship with either Prince Edward or indeed Philip. And one of the interesting revelations, Fergie says how well she got on with the Queen, and the Queen loved her and gave her the corgis. And actually, the Queen was actually behind the scenes, quietly in private, trashing Fergie. So you can't believe anything Fergie says. She claimed that she and Diana were best friends. Well, Diana wanted nothing to do with Fergie by the time she died. She didn't trust her. When she was invited to a party where Fergie was going to be, she just wouldn't go.
That's very interesting indeed. If Charles knew that Andrew was jealous of him and didn't think he was manly enough, and Charles thought that Andrew had an easy ride, why didn't Charles, especially once he became king, move more swiftly to remove Andrew from the middle of the family?
Well, that's the $1 million question. I mean, because in fact, when he is ruthless, when he does things like that, his popularity goes up, and the respect for him goes up, and it baffles me that nothing was done. Of several sort of key points. I mean, when the Yorks, a court case in the High Court, revealed the Yorks had been paid £1.3 million, which they couldn't account for. Again, nothing happened. They tried to shut the story down, but there was no disciplining of the family. And this was money into Fergie's account as well as Andrew and to one of the daughters. So, this is why people are heckling him and saying, what did you know and when did you know it? And you need to say, has Andrew now been protected? But it's the same old story with the royals, always a little too late, too little, the hope the problem will go away, rather than seizing, reputation management is about getting ahead of the story, which they could easily have done. And as a result of not dealing with this properly early on, the story's got bigger and bigger, more and more demands are kind of being made by the public on social media. Questions about public accountability and privilege, royal privilege and accountability are being asked. And this is a sort of crisis they've brought on themselves.
Mm-hmm. Andrew swanned around the world, mostly on the British taxpayer's buck, but he spent a lot of time, especially in Saudi Arabia, and he's a good friend of the Saudi royal family. Why was he there so often?
Well, they treat him well. I mean, they like the other royals. They clearly gave him lots of gifts. Mm-hmm. Though there was one gift he didn't like, an Arab dhow that he suggested to someone that should be used as target practice when he went to open an RAF base. But Yeah, they've given him a palace in Abu Dhabi. He's known a lot of the royals since he was a child.
Wow.
I mean, he was very indiscreet at one event because he said, "Well, I go to my mum goes to the Saudis a lot because they buy lots of arms off us." He's going to have all sorts of young concubines provided for him. There isn't a pesky press that will ask questions. So he's very happy. He's very friendly with MBS, who of course was the man who lured a journalist, Khashoggi, into the embassy in Istanbul and had him chopped up.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of person Andrew likes mixing with.
Good grief. Well, is it possible then that he may move to Saudi long term and live out his days there?
I think that's the most likely thing. That's where King Juan Carlos of Spain ended up in the Middle East. I mean, we've got this performative thing going on that the police are investigating him, etc. But I don't think charges will be brought. We saw it with the Paul Burrell trial. That was shut down because the royal family do not want their secrets aired in public. So I think he'll make a midnight flit. Police protection officer fell asleep, and he ended up at this palace in Abu Dhabi, and that would solve a lot of problems for the royal family.
How much? Well, you said in the book actually that he cost us 15 million quid. It cost the British taxpayer 50 million pounds because of the hotels and the concubines, everything else he was getting up to. How much do you think he made for us? How much do you think he brought in as trade envoy?
I don't think he brought in much. I mean, he was actually counterproductive. And I mean, one of the stories I liked was an embassy. The embassies used to compete not to have him. So they would write these bids saying, you got this really early morning start. You got to go and visit this very boring factory. And Andrew would say, well, thanks very much, but maybe not. And then the guy who wrote the bid would be congratulated.
Fantastic. What else do you know about Andrew that you haven't been able to publish, if even you're allowed to tell us?
Well, there's a lot more about his links with Epstein and that relationship, more about how he abused his time as a trade envoy. I was just saying to your colleague James, there's stuff about him operating in places like the Bahamas, which I need to do a bit more research on. So there's a lot more still to come out on him, and indeed on Sarah Ferguson. I think there's a very good case for her to also be charged, and under a whole series of things. And I think if they do charge her, I suspect she will do some sort of deal with the police and possibly spill the beans on other people. I mean, she's been threatening to do that on Andrew to try and kind of get this some sort of deal from the royal family, some sort of pension.
Yeah.
But rather than sell for lots of money interviews to Oprah, she should be really going to appear in front of the House and Senate in the States and saying what she saw, because she was often staying in Epstein's properties. I mean, one of the things I found was she claimed to have broken off contact with Epstein in 2011, and yet she was still staying at Epstein's properties in 2013-14. So you just can't believe a single word she says.
Yeah.
And of course the daughters have now been drawn into this. We've got Eugenie's charity, the Anti-Slavery Collective, being investigated by the Charities Commission. We've got them raising large sums of money which aren't being spent. More money being spent, almost double the amount of money being spent on salaries is on giving to good causes.
Wow.
So I think there's big questions there for the daughters as well. Questions of Turkish billionaire giving a very expensive piece of medieval art to Eugenie, Beatrice out promoting Saudi banks as Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice rather than as Beatrice Mosey, which is what she really is. And so I think that they need to give up their titles, they need to be removed from the line of succession like their father, and they need to retire into private life.
Okay, well, Andrew Lownie, I think we are done. I mean, so many revelations. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching.
Always a pleasure.
Well, thank you. Thank you for watching. And as I said, there's a link below. Click it. Get the book. Read the book. Is it available as an audio book? Yeah.
Yes, I've read it. I read it.
Fantastic.
And so ebooks,
including the new chapter?
Yes, absolutely. And also we had to make a few corrections, and so everything has been brought absolutely up to date.
Well, that's fantastic. Because that is my preferred version, would be the audiobook. But this is phenomenal reading. It really is. Andrew Lownie, thank you so much once again.
Pleasure.
Well, thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment, hit the hype button. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, do us a favour and leave a review. 5 stars, please. Thank you and bye-bye.